Welcome to the Pivotal Podcast. Today we are joined by Stephanie Lewis, the Senior Director of Enterprise Telehealth at Orlando Health and an adjunct professor in the Masters of Science Health Informatics program at the University of Findlay. We'll explore Stephanie's transition from bedside nursing to telehealth leadership, her contributions to EMR implementation, her dedication to educating future informatics professionals, and her perspectives on the future of healthcare technology. Stephanie, thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, thank you for having me. Very humbled to be here today.
Yeah, this is so fun. You're the first person who is in definitely first professor that I've gotten to interview so far, and maybe the first person in telehealth. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that. But this is going to be fun.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Yeah, super unique perspective. So I'm excited about this. So I love to start at the beginning because that makes sense to me. What initially drew you to nursing? And then how did your passion for technology influence your career path?
Wow. I know we only have an hour. So, I think, when you're going through school, I innately just had this inclination for healthcare and anatomy and, really passionate about helping other people. And, when I got out of high school, I think I also had a inclination for technology. Ended up with a laptop at, the age of 12. And I remember where I was, Y2K, 1999, right on AOL Instant Messenger, and just, always just was on technology from an early age, and got into college and I went into HIM. And made a decision to really kind of pivot more into the clinical skills area, and kind of being a little bit more direct from a patient care perspective. And I ended up getting my RN degree, and landed more or less straight out of school into a level 1 trauma center downtown in Toledo, Ohio, and really learned a lot there.
That's so intense. That's like, if you think about, and for anybody listening who doesn't know, maybe it's whatever, I won't make any assumptions, but HIM is
Health Information Management.
No so that's what'd you say?
No patient touch per se, like directly.
Yeah, that versus trauma is like two very different ends of the spectrum of like what I'm experiencing at work today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew right away I did not want to be a bedside nurse per se. And I know that's terrible being, saying that as a nurse, but I knew in nursing school, I could see, the, day in and day out having a patient load of 4, 5, 6 patients. And the nurses that do that care are doing really fabulous care, but I knew that wasn't for me. And I knew I wanted to kind of elevate my skills out of the gate, and ER is really kind of that place where you become that jack of all trades, absolutely master of only keeping people alive and breathing. And so you get to see some really interesting things, and I had a lucky opportunity to also kind of be exposed to technology. I was always that person who was optimizing workflows and kind of that, hey, how did you fix that and this, and how did you do that, and show me how you did this. And then I ended up moving into...
Wait, hold on. I try not to interrupt people, but I just had this image, and I'm like, we got a bleeder. Wait, how did you change that workflow? Just pause. You'll be fine. Hold on. We got it. It's fine.
Yeah, you go from like cracking chests and rapidly infusing blood and really great traumas. That's the ER nurse in me. I love the blood. And, you go from that, but also having that innate passion for technology. And I think just in nursing school in general, they don't prepare you for maybe like all of the different career paths that a nurse could take. I think back when I went to school, it was like, let's create really great bedside nurses. And, some of you might get the great opportunity to deliver babies, and maybe you might go to the ER. And that wasn't good enough for me. And I think my couple of my instructors did not appreciate saying, like, I don't want to be a bedside nurse. I want to, grow and develop my skills in the technology field. And they don't, they don't like to hear that right out of the gate. And I think I recognized pretty early on, you do have to get your experience somewhere clinically. And I recommend that for any, clinical person kind of thinking about even informatics, is you have to get a really great foundation and base and an understanding of, how a hospital works, or how an outpatient clinic might work, or how post-acute services work, and just kind of how, it all plays together, so that it, if you want to go into that informatics route as a clinician, you have that base understanding and the language and the understanding to be able to kind of bridge conversations with a lot of different roles, especially in the ER. You can walk up to an attending and, speak about what orders or what you think, and there's a level of respect there, and down to talking with family members. You just have such a wide of roles that you're exposed to, and family members, that again, it just kind of makes you that jack of all trades, master of nothing. But
so I had two thoughts that just popped into my head here. That notification sound you heard, that was actually my brain. So the first thought was, actually, let me give them to you in reverse order. It sounds like, and I've heard this a lot, soft skills are so important in nursing and informatics, like in any of that. I mean, how you handle people, like if it's because you're interacting with very different types of people, experiencing very different things, right? If you're interacting with a family member who's concerned, or a patient, or an attending, like these are all very different. They need to see different versions of you, basically, for what they need, right? So that's interesting. And I would love to hear more about how like nursing programs prepare you for that. But the other thing I was thinking of, because I have a background in college admissions consulting, and I know we'll get to student stuff in the future, or here, later, the near future. But what I found, my approach working with students was, I want to help them figure out their target career and then reverse engineer the best pathway to get them there. And I think there might be a real opportunity for that in informatics, because what I'm hearing from so many people is, oh, I fell into this, I fell into this, I fell into this. And so I found this amazing aptitude test. It's called uscience.com. That's not sponsored. I just loved it. But it's the science of you, YOU. And it's this battery of like 10 or 15 brain games, and they take 5 or 10 minutes each. So you're spending like an hour and a half doing this thing. And then it measures your aptitudes and compares you against maybe 600 plus different career fields, and shows you even graphically how your aptitudes align with each one, and shows you what your really strong fits are. I wonder if you could really drill down into the different types of pathways available in nursing, and if there was a resource, or eventually someone could create a resource like this. Maybe I'll do it one day, who knows? But they would actually show, hey, here are specific aptitudes that make this kind of nurse great, or this, and then a similar matching kind of thing, because I think that if we have more transparency into, this is my end goal, I can make an informed decision and say, okay, do I think that maybe I would be happy there long term? And then if I have that end goal in mind, and I can refine that, happiness kind of idea by having conversations with people who are there, shadowing people who are there, but then also reverse engineer that pathway to get there. I can, instead of drifting along in the currents of life, I can take a lot more agency and going where I want to be.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. I think a lot of people just lock into the role and really find they're passionate and kind of like, what they were meant to do. And I think as you kind of reverse engineer, I remember specifically at one of my roles, how do I get on the team that helps with this EMR? Who are those people? I remember thinking that like there are these wizards behind the scene, and there's got to be clinical people involved and in these processes. And how do I figure out who these people are and go down this pathway, because I think this is what I want to do. But I look back and I remember asking myself this question, and I had no idea.
How did you do it? That's perfect. It's a perfect segue. Like, how did you figure it out, going from like, I wonder how I do that, to, oh, that's how you do it? Okay.
Luck. I mean, it again, like it wasn't really prominent back when I was going through school and in college, and a weird intersection of fate and luck. Literally, I was trying to figure out, like, just softly Googling, like, what is nursing informatics, and just trying to understand, like, what does that even mean? Fast forward a few weeks later, I literally woke up in the middle of the night and went on a job search. I just typed in like informatics, on Glassdoor or LinkedIn or whatever site at the time, and lo and behold, there was a nursing informatics position, which you never see out there at the time, at a hospital about an hour east of where I was. And I was like, well, gosh darn it, I'm going to apply. And I had no experience in it, but I grew up in the area, so I was like, okay, I know the hospital, I know where it's at. I kind of at least have a little bit of a connection point, so to speak, instead of just kind of blindly applying. And I got the job. I don't know how.
We're like, oh crap, what do I do now?
Exactly. I
I
had
do this
no idea
job.
what I was doing. And, I took that opportunity because I drove an hour each way every day. And I
Oh
think
gosh.
that's a piece of, and I took a pay cut because I wanted to get into the field. I wanted the experience. And I knew that that position was going to be pivotal in my career because I was going to learn so much from that and have some really great experiences. And I did. I worked that for about a year and a half and used tools like the Crimson Continuum of Care to really kind of drill down with data and analytics, and learned a lot about DRGs and how we can be more efficient, or create cost reductions based on what we're seeing within our hospital. Also learned a little bit of case management with that as well. So you kind of saw the full circle of hospital operations, and how data and the application of informatics can make improvements. And that's the job. I asked myself the question because literally across the hallway was a lady who ran the Meditech EMR implementation. And I was like, well, she has like the best job on the planet. Like, how do I do what she's doing?
Wow.
And I was very envious of that. Don't get me wrong, I loved what I did at the time,
Yeah.
but the drive was kind of getting a little, long each day, day in and day out. So I inevitably got the call of my life. I was still moonlighting in the ER just to keep skills up, as any nurse does who makes that decision to kind of go from bedside to office side, so to speak. And, my boss said, hey, we want you to come back to the ER full time. I know you're doing that informatics thing. We're going to implement this thing called Epic, and we want you to help, train all of our staff and providers. We think you'd be really great at it. And so I got lucky because a leader saw in me my innate skill set of technology and informatics, and that clinical piece to be able to kind of pull all that together, especially with a group that I had some good rapport with. So I literally quit the job at the rural hospital that I was working at, and the word Epic changed my life after that. And I helped that department go live on Epic, and I loved it. I mean, I was
Wow.
in front of a classroom doing classroom training, which they credentialed you to do, which I had never done formal classroom education or any training. And that was really fun. And I found a piece of the passion that I was missing in my career pretty early on, and was really able to have fun in what I did, and be able to kind of be looked upon as like that bridge between, IT and the EMR, and what our team was doing. And then eventually the go live dissipated, and there I was back to, gunshot wounds and all the fun stuff. And I was like, gosh, like, how do I figure out how to do that full time? And
Wow.
I took
I
steps
have,
to
I have a
do that.
question here. So, question about when you transition from trauma nursing to nursing informatics, I imagine that was a pretty radical shift in the pace of your day,
Yeah.
right? So, what was it like to experience that?
Slow. It was slow. But like I said, I still kept my skills up. So I still had, I was able to kind of fulfill the patient care side because I was still picking up shifts. And I wasn't quite ready to fully give that up because I was so early in my nursing career. That would have been like death of getting my RN, I think, at that point. So I made it a point to kind of keep skills up until a point, until I realized, this is what I was meant to do, and how do I really kind of bring it to the next level.
Yeah. Okay. So you go through that go live, and then you're back in the ER, and then what happened?
Um, I I had some good connections with the Epic team, and again, I was like, gosh, how do I do this for a living? Like, how do I make this what I do? Because I'm really good at it. And luckily, a position within the company on the corporate side opened up, and so I went from like hospital ER, helping with still some of the classroom training from time to time post go live, but still kind of working in the ER clinically, to doing full time Monday through Friday um, physician optimization, go live support, and training and education in the classroom on the outpatient side. So I really had this like nice segue into, outpatient operations, and literally lived elbow to elbow with physicians day in and day out. And I took that informatics like practice where, because I don't think in a swim lane. I don't think that, we can't educate ourselves, to tell a clinician, that you can't click somewhere. You should be educated, because you can't tell providers how to bill, but I think you can help providers build their notes to meet, the coding and documentation requirements that have been educated to those providers. And, really kind of bridging the gap between the normal just click here, because it was more than just click here. It's you have to click here because you have to meet your MIPS measure for quality, right? And so that reasoning and the value clicked for provider. Oh, you're going to want to do this because I'm really good about making people efficient in Epic. You're going to want to do all of this stuff and program it this way and customize this so you don't spend so much pajama time after work closing notes and doing documentation. So I really lived in that role, traveling around just a little bit too, on the corporate side, just doing Epic optimization and training, and loved it.
That's awesome. You hit a really key point there, just in life in general. It's, I think, not, I'm not alone in this. I hate to do something because I should do it because I'm supposed to do it. But if somebody educates me as to why it's actually beneficial for me to do something, or why I should be doing the thing, like it helps me intrinsically want to do that thing. And it's like, oh, that's the mark of a good communicator, or a good instructor, a good trainer, a good teacher. You're showing somebody not, hey, this is just like do this because I said so, but and trust me, bro, but do this because it's going to make your life better in this way. And that's awesome. I think that's so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the reason why this is 6 clicks, but intrinsically, we should also be challenging our IT team or our EMR team or whatever, IT team, to say, can we get this down from 6 clicks to maybe 3? I understand that there's some clicks there. So I think there's some elements of, workflow optimization and workflow design in everything that we do, at least in my world of trying to make folks as efficient as possible to embrace the technology. Because really, I think ultimately that's the goal, is that there's ease of use, and there's the ability to not have disdain for the technology that we're using, that it's looked at as it's a tool here to help you, and it can be really efficient if you let it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so then where did that lead to?
Um, so locally, I did that for a number of years, and then locally, another organization, the competitor in town, I'd heard was going live on Epic, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna, throw my resume into the ring and, see if I can't step into a principal trainer type of role. And lo and behold, I was interviewed, basically, I don't know, a couple days later, and on a plane to Wisconsin, where Epic is headquartered, to get my certification as the ambulatory principal trainer for that particular organization with a team of several others. So I came in kind of brand new to the organization, and had ahead of me multiple waves of new EMR implementation and go live, but I had more of the training focus and could build the training environment and design the classes and train the credentialed trainers. And it was just really this nice mix of EMR build and being able to mentor clinical and non-clinical people to train these classes and do knowledge offset based on some experience that I've had and seeing what's worked at a previous organization and bringing that to a new organization. I think that's kind of where I found my niche a little bit. And my boss at the time was the CMIO, also had the Epic training team underneath of him, and I eventually got promoted to team lead, and then eventually took over, leading the entire Epic training team at that point, which was a lot of fun. I had a team of 50 really
Wow.
talented individuals, and I think from a leadership perspective, that was like the first, foray into that. And I think I was like 30 at the time.
Wow.
So it not only are you kind of like moving into like, a larger leadership role, and you're now leading people who are more than half your age. And, so there's definitely some challenges from moving as a peer into that role. But I think what I really appreciated about that role is I had a lot of runway and a lot of support from my leadership to do the right thing and be innovative. We did a lot of really neat things, and arguably, I feel like we had one of the best training teams out there because we weren't told no, and made strategic decisions to not just have our trainers be classroom trainers, but to be a good support team who also need to be out in the hospitals and the practices and helping our end users be more efficient with what they're doing, and being more efficient with the way that we deliver training, and how can we refine and reduce the amount of hours that we're sending folks through. So it was just so many different pieces we got to interact with and do some really great work. And really, I think the thing I'm most proud of is seeing some of the people on that team that we were able to kind of elevate into their own informatics roles, because I hired teachers. I didn't hire
Yeah.
nurses. I specifically would pull people in and go, I can teach you Epic. I can't teach you how to teach.
Mm.
And so we made some really great EMR trainers out of non-clinical people who were teachers, and they've forayed into and moved into roles that, where they're now analysts on, an Epic team building it in EMR. So I think it's just such a great way to, if you want to kind of break in somewhere, sometimes you have to take the pay cut, or you have to take the odd role that, maybe you do some really great work in, but it's that stepping stone to get you those, certifications, or kind of be able to shine and do all of that great work that you're doing to kind of move into that next step.
That's really interesting, because whenever I tell people that I do informatics recruiting, and the thing that led me to this was burnout in healthcare and seeing informatics as a potential opportunity for somebody who's experiencing burnout to find new purpose and new hope in helping, like, use their background to help people differently, but still similarly, right? People always suggest, oh, what if you also help teachers? And I mean, my wife was a middle school math teacher who got burned out and left teaching. And I always thought, oh no, well, my target is informatics. It's not teaching. That's not related. And it's like, oh, well, maybe it could be based
Mm-hmm.
on what you just shared, right? Like, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for a couple of different people to all benefit from this one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't kind of stayed in tune with what that market looks like, because a lot of organizations now have either moved to Cerner or Epic, and I think the contractor landscape is even kind of lessened, quite a bit, because those folks were out there just kind of traveling all over the country, and what a great job to be able to be highly paid, and kind of working in those types of roles. But Now you kind of have to hone in a little bit and, try to get into some organizations that are maybe just now going live with Epic, or try to get in with a consulting company who is willing to certify you, which I think is a little bit harder. But yeah, I think there's some interesting starting points, at least from what I've experienced, in my lane of how, if that's an area of interest for you, might be a great way to start. So
That's really interesting. Now, what about challenges that you've faced in leadership roles, and then how you've addressed those? And actually, maybe before you dive into that, what are you doing now?
yeah, that's why I was like, do you have an hour? No. So the pandemic hit. I think it was like D-Day, March 13th, Friday, March 13th. I feel like we all remember that day. And at least for me, I was really trying to figure out a way to move 220 classes a month virtual. We ran a small college, from an Epic training perspective. And alongside of that, and a fabulous team that helped make that transition happen, I was helping out our ambulatory team with some of the pandemic COVID and moving things to virtual, because I had the experience previously on that team. And I was fascinated by it, but I didn't think at the time that there was any type of long-term trajectory with virtual care. It just wasn't something as part of the norm. It was there as a tool to make the care happen, because it had to.
It was a
And
Band-Aid.
yeah, it wasn't, again, no one exposed you to virtual care as a nurse per se, and it's a lot more prevalent now. But um, again, my boss tapped me to move over to the operations side. So I moved from IT to a position within the physicians group, where I was the director of the Telehealth Institute. We formalized a kind of like this care hub of excellence for virtual care. And for 3-ish years before I moved into this role, lived, breathed, eat virtual care, and helped expand strategy, across an organization and increase utilization. And through that position, I learned a lot about, what types of virtual care are out there, and how people can, even from an informatics perspective, still have the capability to kind of use those skills in this field. Because I don't think it's leveling off. I still think it's out there and strong. And as long as our federal regulations kind of keep it going here in the next, upcoming years, there's a lot of opportunity to really kind of grow. If virtual care is kind of, an area of interest, there's definitely a lot of room to grow into those roles. But then, I think, a lot of things kind of came together, and I feel like I did what I could do at that particular organization. And again, I wasn't looking for a job at the time. But sadly, all of my family was retiring south, and randomly, again, alignment of stars, randomly went online and was like, what is like my role look like, from an industry perspective? And lo and behold, there was the position I have today. Here, I'm now the senior director of enterprise telehealth at Orlando Health, located in Central Florida, and have the humble opportunity to increase and help support strategy for virtual care across the organization. So made the long and arduous trip, across the country, south, and set up a new homestead and get to build a new team and bring some skills and experience down to a really great organization. So that's how I got to where I'm at today.
That's amazing. So what is it? Unpack that for me a little bit. What do you mean by enterprise telehealth?
Yeah, great question. I ask myself the questions every day. No, I'm just joking. So there's so many different flavors of virtual care. You've got synchronous, scheduled, asynchronous, unscheduled. You've got, different things that we've maybe experienced as consumers, like virtual urgent care. Maybe we've had a video visit with our provider. Maybe we've done an online questionnaire to seek care for things like pink eye. Or maybe you've had experience with family members who have received like a blood pressure cuff or a weight scale in their home. And, they're being remotely monitored by a care team. So there's so many different flavors of telehealth. And when we look at an organization, what we do from an enterprise perspective is we try to make sure that we streamline technology, but we also wrap our arms around some of the operational processes that maybe an IT team isn't necessarily always thinking about. And so an enterprise team is this center of excellence where we are making sure that we're educating our staff and patients, about the options that are available to them, and providing the most digital equity and digital health literacy options that we can. Are we being compliant with what we're doing? Are we following the rules of the road virtually and from the state or federal level? Are we, making sure that we're billing appropriately? So really just trying to pull the holistic view together, but then drive the strategy for, what types of virtual care could be done in different areas of the organization, and really trying to pull it all together to have a seamless hybrid experience for patients, because virtual care should never replace in person. It should be there as a augment to the care that we provide our patients every day.
Yeah. So I think that gives us a good idea into how you measure success as a team. But what about you in your leadership role? You specifically, how do you measure success and impact in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hire the best. If you surround yourself with a really great team, then you're going to, be meeting those goals and objectives a lot more quickly sometimes.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think as a team, collaboratively, it's not just internally. When you work collaboratively with other teams, you set those key performance indicators for, the projects and initiatives that you're trying to do. And as a leader, if you could help lead a team, to meet those goals, that to me is a measure of how effective, as a leadership team, are we being in trying to get some of that great work done.
Yeah. I mean, are you able to dive into any specifics? And it's fine if not, but like, what do some of those KPIs look like in telehealth?
Yeah, excellent question. And I'll answer this in two ways because it was really interesting. My first 3 years in telehealth, we were just focused on turning the light on. Can we get the technology out there? Can we do it in an economical way? Can we get the use case established? And I think we weren't necessarily maybe thinking about what the KPI was long term. I think down the road we were, but initially it was just like, we got to take care of patients and like make it happen. And coming down here to Orlando Health, my current organization has a really great focus on patient experience and quality, which is a driver for what we do anyway, but there's this really heightened focus into that. And I think that is one reason why our organization is so successful, is that we lead into projects with that. We make sure that we're, thinking about the patient first and the quality outcomes that we're going to get from that in a virtual experience. And so an example of that would be, I oversee our remote patient monitoring team, and a measure of our success in the goal of the program is to keep patients out of the hospital.
Mm.
There are financial penalties, but it's also a better outcome for the patient if we can keep them at home. So, one of our measures among many are, what's our hospital readmission rate? And I love to tout this, ours is 1%, which is unheard of.
What's like a standard for somebody who doesn't know? Somebody like me who has no idea.
Yeah, so typical like RPM programs are seeing, and it varies, the really good organizations have a lower percentage, but you're probably anywhere between that 10 to 15%. So
Whoa.
we give really great care and have a lot of really good success with our patients. So, we're not only tracking that, but we're tracking like how quickly can our nurses respond to high alerts. If somebody steps on the scale and there's a couple pound increase, that means that there's maybe some fluid overload. You could be getting short of breath with congestive heart failure. We need to intervene. And so we're even tracking how quickly we intervene. We track patient satisfaction. So there's a lot of quality and data, just a lot of data that helps the foundation of portray the story of what we're doing, and cost savings, all of it. So I feel like that informatics piece comes out in me a bit because I love the data, and I
Yeah.
love being able to share not only the program success, but you have to have it to kind of tell the story of a program like ours where we aren't billing for that service yet, and there's opportunity. Then that's not the driver for us, but the driver for us is to keep patients out of the hospital, but there's also a cost reduction to that, to the organization. And a lot of organizations are feeling those penalties of those hospital readmission programs from a Medicare perspective, and they're looking at different ways to service patients in different ways beyond just the doctor's office. And technology is a great way to do that. Remote patient monitoring is just one of the ways that we do that here, and we do that with a lot of data.
Yeah, well, so for real, I was thinking like with telehealth, especially since you've got a more limited range of I don't know, data points maybe that you can get, or because there's a lot of value to being seen in person, right? But maximizing how you leverage that data is probably really, really important, because you're like, okay, if what we're getting is more limited, we've got to do everything we can with this to make it as effective as possible. So health informatics or data analytics come into play really
Oh,
crucially there, it seems.
absolutely. And I think it's much harder, especially like, just in the telehealth world, you're building a lot from scratch.
Mm,
Some telehealth use cases have been around for a long time. Telestroke has been around for years and years. We've seen the prevalence of remote patient monitoring before the pandemic, but now we've got this proliferation of, uh, Amazon Clinic. You can go on and see a doctor in 2 seconds, and there's a lot that kind of goes with that. So again, there's just so much out there that's happening, and you have to have your arms wrapped around baseline data to make the business case for the
mm.
economics of what you're trying to do, but then also set those KPIs for long-term value, and showing the story of why it's successful, and why we can start a pilot and measure success, or come back to the table and say what didn't work, but then how can we take that success and from an enterprise level strategize where else we can use this across the organization.
Yeah. Wow. And what you're saying too about 10% to 15% readmission rate versus 1% made me think of one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and it's 10x is easier than 2x. And the idea behind this, and it's really applicable to anything, wherever you want to get 10x results. So many people focus on, and so many organizations focus on, we want to double our results. And the premise of the book is that that's challenging because so many different things will get you to doubling your results. But if you were going to 10x your results, you really have to drill down and focus in on like the one or maybe two things that could move the needle in that way. So can you highlight specifically, or is this like, I don't know if this is like this is a trade secret, this is how we did it, don't tell everybody. But I feel like healthcare is not like that, because it's like, no, we want healthy people in general, we're nurses because we
Yeah.
care about people. So yeah, how did you do that? How did you go from 10% on average to like, no, ours is 1%? What sets you apart?
Really great nurses, really
Mm,
great clinical team, and they do monitoring every day and really great outreach. And we've constructed our program with protocols and workflows in place to support that. And again, really great data to make sure it's right. So again, if you surround yourself with a really great team and the technology to back it, then you will see those success rates. But you have to invest in the model. You can't um, halfway it, I guess.
yeah.
You may not see as much success, but I think one example that comes to mind from a previous organization is how do you go from 2x to 10x? I honestly, there was a lot of resistance with virtual care when I first, started, and I often thought about how the heck do I get clinicians from point A to point B. There's a lot of change management that happens there, but it's not just about the providers, it's about the staff. Our staff bought in to the idea of virtual care in their office, or the office managers bought in. And I quickly realized we incentivize providers a lot for quality measures and meeting goals and doing all of that work. But really, the people behind the scenes making that work happen a lot of the time is the clinical staff. So quickly and early on, I asked our leadership team, I said, hey, if we want to move the needle from 0.3% of virtual visits as to what we're doing today to more than that, we're going to have to do something different, because this isn't going to work if you're only, compensating one group and not the other. So we actually incentivize staff to offer virtual visits and make it part of their script. It was just a behavior change. And so if we put money in their pocket before Christmas, guess what happened?
Yeah, I would imagine those offers would increase substantially.
Triple their numbers.
Yeah.
Absolutely tripled the numbers, and
Yeah.
it took a little bit of incentive because it was a little bit of extra work. I think they were thinking, like, what's in it for me? So
Yeah.
just an example of, like, you got to kind of think a little bit different outside of your informatics box, maybe just a smidge, and say, hey, like, would a little bit of money kind of like grease the behavior modification wheel a little bit to get us to where we need to be? And are there things that we need to incorporate into incentive structures to get there?
That's super interesting. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Don't just tell me that I should do something. Give me a reason why I should care about doing something. And financial incentives are a reason.
Yeah, maybe not so much informatics related, but it was one way to kind of push the needle quite a bit. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So tell me, so we've talked about telehealth now. Let's circle back to what we talked about in the beginning with the other unique perspective you bring. Tell me about your work at University of Findlay.
yeah, so I don't know, I'm a crazy person, and I decided to get my master's in the middle of a big hospital go live and all of that planning. And I knew at the time I needed to, kind of expand my knowledge base and, move into getting a master's degree. And I'm not an MBA type of girl, so I definitely pursued options within that informatics realm, made a specific choice not to go nursing informatics, but more general informatics. And being in the state of Ohio, the University of Findlay offered a program. They were about an hour south of us, but they offered a full online, and I decided to go for it. And I finished my master's in about a year, amongst redoing a kitchen and all of all the craziness with, like, go live. I'm surprised I'm not completely white haired, but made it work. Graduated pretty much top of class there, and then I think I expressed pretty early on to the dean at the time, and I said, hey, like, I still love that ability to train and mentor and educate. Is this a way for me to kind of do my day-to-day work, which has maybe a smidge of that, but how can I, bridge that into, some type of adjunct work on the side and broaden my skills a bit. So lo and behold, they tapped me, a couple months later and said, hey, do you want to teach? And really kind of fell in love with it, and now teach for the program I graduated from and have loved it. And I've taught a handful of different classes, but I primarily now teach project management.
Cool. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's the typical profile or characteristics of, like, the master's students that you're teaching?
It's interesting. We have a lot of international students that come to our university. Lots of dental students seeking to kind of augment their education with informatics. Pharmacy students taking a couple core classes, and then you've got the other core group, the regular core group of folks who are genuinely interested in informatics, and oftentimes they're taking that knowledge back to their home country. And
Interesting.
so I think for me, it was such a really great learning opportunity, because you get to learn about how healthcare functions a little bit in those countries, but then they're learning about American healthcare at the same time. So you're kind of trying to work through some of those details a little bit and learning along the way.
Yeah. So now, are these students, are they coming straight out of like an undergrad program, or are they like somewhere along the, in the middle of their career?
I there's a mix there. I think Jenny could probably speak to that a little bit, my dean, a little bit further than what I can. But
Sure.
I think they're just seeking, post, I guess it's called secondary education, and really trying to move into that informatics field. So you definitely see folks who, it's interesting where they don't really know much about it,
Yeah,
and they're there to learn more.
for sure. Are there certain specific questions that just seem to come up regularly, like
Yeah,
from
can I do
students?
my internship with you?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They're like, we know you don't do this full time. You have another
yeah, they
job.
know.
Let me
Yeah, they
come in.
know I have a day job because I don't usually respond during the day. But yeah, they're like, hey, what you do is interesting. I didn't think informatics would apply into that field, and I don't know a lot about it. So I've taken on several students that way, for their capstone / internship. But
Cool.
I think the second most question I get is what do you recommend? Like, how do I get into it? How do I get into informatics? It, it's tricky because our program's non-clinical too. So you've got, a mix of non-clinical and some folks who are clinical. So each student's a little bit different, but I always reverse the question, and I try to reverse engineer, just maybe not the most efficient way that you're probably doing it. But I try to ask them, like, what's your passion? Where do you want to be? Where do you kind of want to land as a career? And like, let's work backwards, because you're going to have to get an entry level position somewhere just to get established, and you're going to get there, but you kind of got to work the path a little bit to ultimately end up where you want to be.
So you're not telling them, all right, step 1, go to bed. Step 2, wake up in the middle of the night. Step 3,
Yeah.
search for this position on Indeed or Glassdoor or LinkedIn.
I'm trying to figure out what they want to do. Like what's your passion? And if it's public health, okay, or if it's virtual care, I got you. What is it? And then, what are those areas that are emerging, or carve out your niche as well. Like what's your niche going to be, so you can really set yourself apart. But I also try to give some advice. Get every certification you can. If your instructors are recommending getting your PMP, or your black belt, or whatever it is, go the extra mile and get your AHIC certification. Those types of things to an employer say that you've taken the initiative, you go the extra mile, and you've solidified your knowledge base. And I look for those things. I look for those folks who are really doubling down and passionate about getting in, because those folks have energy and are willing to learn a little bit more than maybe some who haven't focused in on those areas.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like a lot of that advice would probably apply as well to clinicians who are interested in transitioning, not just students.
Absolutely. Anywhere you can proactively learn, because I think in informatics, you're always going to be placed into a project or a role that you encounter something you just know nothing about. And so you can't depend on your leadership to really spoon feed you every detail of how this piece of healthcare works. So you have to create a network of people. I call the unicorns. You have to have your unicorns, not in your same market, that you can kind of lean on and bounce ideas off of, and create those partnerships and friendships, from a knowledge perspective. But continue to learn, and you've got to dive into all of the resources that are at your fingertips. And I think they're highly underutilized, especially now that we've got AI and chat GPT. Life gets a little bit easier, but still you gotta learn, and you gotta put the time and the energy in. If you don't know something, you gotta master it.
Yeah, absolutely. I always refer to ChatGPT as one of my favorite colleagues. I mean, I talk to it so many times throughout the day.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a pivotal tool for me.
Yeah.
Plug the pivotal word there.
Yeah, right. It's
Free.
worth that $20 a month. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, what? Say again?
I was gonna say it's definitely, there's life before ChatGPT, and then there's life after.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I highly recommend the paid subscription. I mean, $20 a month for increased reasoning ability, and I don't even know what the differences are anymore between like the free version and the paid version. I remember because I signed up as soon as I could
Oh, I
because
did
I
too.
was already hooked. Yeah, I was already hooked on like the free version. And I was like, okay, I don't want any message caps. I want to be able to do all these different things, and it's like I'm getting features earlier, and
Yeah,
it's made my life so much more efficient.
it's a good example of taking the initiative to learn something new. And, for me, like, and maybe I'm just a huge nerd, but I listen to AI podcasts on my way home and to work so I can, prompt and polish my way through being more efficient in
Yeah.
what I do and how do I get the best results so I don't waste my time. And it really just takes the mundane things out of your work that would honestly just take me hours. It does it in 30 seconds. So
Yeah.
I can't live
Absolutely. No,
without
no. I mean, if they turned it off tomorrow, I don't know what I would do. I would probably have to take the day off and like, or a couple days off just to grieve and like,
Yeah,
I don't even know, figure out like, and how do I work again? And how
yeah,
do I get used to being so slow? It's like turning off the internet. It's like, now what do I do?
yeah. And I think there's ethical applications to it as well. And when we talk about university students and the prevalence of what is actively happening out there, I'm already starting to use strategies that our university has given us and think about ways of how can I use this in a way to teach, because you know in the classes I teach, like how can I create my own custom thread, and create my own custom GPT and use it as a learning tool for the students instead of leveraging, turn it in and seeing if somebody's used AI to plagiarize. Like how can we turn the table a little bit and get more creative? And I just challenged my supervisor over nurse triage. I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we figured out a way ethically, to create, scenario-based prompts to train our new nurses who are coming in for phone triage, because now it's got the voice and you could banter back and forth just like it was a patient with a nurse. And is there a way that we can maybe leverage it in a way to educate?
So I have
To
a question about
help?
that because
Yeah,
is the voice, so I've definitely prompted it with my phone and then had it still unfortunately transcribes everything for me, and because I have an Android, so I use it in
yeah.
Chrome. Are you on an iPhone because you have like the iOS app then?
Android all the way. Yeah.
Oh, Android. Okay. So wait, so how is there an app for Android now? Am I that
Oh
behind on this
yeah,
one?
yeah. And you can pull up your custom GPT threads too. So
Wow.
what I love about it is, like, if you were trying to use it for education purposes, like how many people get freaked out when someone's like listening over their phone call, or we have a way to now see the transcript and analyze, did you respond in a way that kind of meets the protocol or the disposition that we were expecting? You know what I mean? Not that we've done this yet, but it's just AI kind of brings those innovative thoughts out of, like, how could we leverage this in different ways, not only in academia, but in real life ethically, and leverage this great tool that we have. And it's not just ChatGPT; it's we're seeing the proliferation everywhere we go, and I think we need to be cautious in understanding from an informatics level how the data models are have learned, and how they're um, providing responses. But I think if you really wrap your arms around it and understand it in a way that it can be done in the right way, it's such a great tool.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, because it can definitely be a black box, and you're like, I don't know how this thing was wired to respond and what it's basing this off of. So,
Right. Is
you
there
got to be.
bias? Those
Mhm.
types of things. Like, are we getting the responses that we hope to have? So,
Yeah. So aside from ChatGPT, through like the AI podcasts or however else you've discovered things, are there other tools you found that you really find just indispensable for your work or just in life?
um, all of it. So, I've experienced, and I'm waiting for Sora. I think that's the video applicate the video to come out. Um, I was I think there's some great application to use that and expedite the training um, development piece that takes a lot of time from a video
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
I can understand maybe why they're holding off on releasing some of those types of functionalities until maybe after certain things are happening this year. So I'm really excited to see what video generation comes out of that from a patient education perspective and how we can maybe leverage that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what you're implying, but talk about a way to like completely rig an election, right? You're
Well,
like, hey, look at this video of what this candidate did or said or
yeah, I
whatever.
think they're doing safety testing, of course, and that needs to happen. But I did recently use the song generator. I forget what it's called, and it was absolutely out of this world. You can create lyrics in ChatGPT, copy and paste it over into the song generator, and it's tell it to have a 80s pop synth type of tone, and it's creating music in a matter of seconds. And I was adding theme songs to our quality overview decks talking about how great telehealth is as an intro icebreaker. There's just so many different like great fun things you can do with AI, and it's whether that's photo generation or creating PowerPoints for you or summarizing a PowerPoint for talking points. Like the use cases are endless.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think you got to wrap your arms around it, and I think you got to understand how it works. And I ask people if they use it,
Oh
during it.
yeah.
I just like to know if you're thinking smarter, not harder.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? Like I used it last night for creating like an award-winning she crab soup recipe because I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina. My kids and I caught some crabs over the weekend, and it's like, okay, let's make this. We've never cooked this before. I've used it to generate images for it's so crazy. It's like maybe you have like these ideas, but you don't have the artistic capability sometimes of carrying them out, of executing them. And I'm like, oh, there's a skate park downtown that I like to take my 5-year-old to. We go skateboarding together. It's something that we just really enjoy. And there's graffiti all over the place. It's just really, there's like silly stuff, whatever. Then there's really, really great pieces, right? And I just love the idea of like street art and Banksy and whatever. And I'm like, okay, I am not going to like create a stencil. I'm not artistically gifted in that way, but I have ideas for them. So I'm like, hey, ChatGPT and Dolly, generate some images for me and then give me some ideas of some websites where I could order these stencils to be made. And now I can go and like, hey, like my daughter who's 8 absolutely loves painting and art and everything. And now we could go, theoretically, we haven't done it yet. We could go together and like tag the place up a little bit with some crazy fun images,
Oh yeah. And it's gotten so good where you could just, tell it to fix one little area. It's almost like Photoshop, degree. And I haven't explored that piece of it yet, but it takes the like I'm not that great of an artist, but I've got the creativity, I've got the vision, and so these tools really kind of allow you to express that creativity in maybe an area that you can't draw, or get angsty with your tags in an area. You can just tell it what you're thinking and polish it a little bit, and in seconds you've created a masterpiece.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Now you mentioned, and I know we're kind of coming up at the end of our time here, but if you've got time for like one more
Yeah.
question, you talked about hiring. As a leader, when you're building a team, what kind of challenges do you experience in hiring? Because what I've heard is there's a huge amount of interest in informatics, but like there can be some real hiring challenges in identifying like, okay, what's actually going to be the right fit talent to help our organization achieve its mission?
Yeah. And I'm using my lens of, just my experience of what I've hired for. And I think one of the things that I look at as a hiring manager is how easily adaptable are you to learning? I can teach you anything, but are you willing to learn? And if you're only willing to be status quo, it's not going to work for me, because I live in a world of digital innovation and thinking outside of the box. And so we've got to have folks, that I identify that are easily adaptable to change, are willing to learn, and bring a really great foundation with them that fits culturally into my team. But also, what's that niche thing that they're going to help elevate themselves, and how do I figure out how to make that person shine, because each person's kind of a puzzle in the team, and how do you kind of elevate them and get them to that next point? Because I always hire people with an understanding of, I know you're never going to work for me for 20 years, I don't expect you to, but I need to know where you want to be so I can help get you there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So a lot of it comes back to, okay, I've got this overall organizational puzzle. How are you going to fit into it, right? But what are your aptitudes, your interests, and then your long-term goals and vision, and how can we help you get there so we all win?
Absolutely. Because I think if you can keep somebody internally, it's way better than seeing someone really great with a really great skill set that has grown a lot, move on to another organization because of pay or, they jump ship. So if we can keep that talent inside, it just, as an organization, really, um, you know, long term helps, and everybody's going to grow. So how can I help
Mhm.
get you there? And I think that's a piece of, in your career. Are you satisfied in what's that roadmap for your growth? And I think a lot of people don't really understand that from their leaders' view of where they maybe see themselves, and maybe they don't have those crucial conversations, and maybe they do, but as a leader, you need to understand where they want to be so you can help get them there. That's your job.
Yeah, that's super good. I love that. And I really firmly believe that we've all been created for a purpose and equipped with these gifts and talents and abilities and aptitudes to accomplish that purpose. So if we can figure out how we've been wired and then find these different roles that will engage that, right, and let us flex that mental muscle, we'll be way, way more engaged in our work that we're doing. We're going to be way more productive so the organization wins, and the retention is going to go up too, because when you're engaged in what you're doing, you want to keep doing it and keep growing. And then when you have that innate curiosity also, you keep learning and developing and moving forward. It's phenomenal. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said curiosity. That's one of our core values here where I
Mm,
work. And you have to be. I think in informatics you have to have that core ethos of curiosity, because if you don't, you're not going to progress with how rapidly, our industry changes.
yeah, that's so good. I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, I know that's about our time for today. Is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with before we go?
Uh, go be amazing.
Yeah,
Go be
that's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's super good.
Thank
That's great.
you
Well,
for your time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your journey and your insights with us. Uh, man, I love these conversations because I don't know, I can ask very similar questions to different people and get so many different answers. And just it seems like everybody finds their way a little differently. So that's awesome. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So for our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this episode. You can share your comments on LinkedIn or directly on the podcast website at pivotal.buzzsprout.com. And if you know somebody in healthcare who would find this episode inspiring or beneficial, and you know what, let me not limit it because we talked about teachers too, right? If you can think of anybody that would benefit from this, share it with them directly. Literally, you can share it on LinkedIn, anywhere else you get your podcasts. So stay tuned for more episodes here on the Pivotal Podcast.